This avalanche safety report is brought to you by MTN-TV. Learn more at MTN-TV.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Lukens with MTN-TV, along with Brian Lazar, who knows everything about avalanches, Colorado Avalanche Information Center. Brian, it's getting a little warmer. How's it looking out there?
Yeah, well, it has taken a toll on our snowpack, and I'll start by just kind of showing the current state of the snowpack as we sit here on Thursday afternoon. We have, because of the recent warm-up, now dropped substantially below long-term average. We sit at about 85% of snowpack across the state, as we on Thursday afternoon here. And you can see there's a fairly stark north to south gradient. The northern mountains, particularly up near Routt County, and portions of the Front Range are sitting very close to long-term median, or almost 100% of average. We're down in the southern mountains, you can see we're closer to 60 or 65%. So the north is doing much better on snow than the south. But even if we look at a statewide time series here, this green line is our long-term median snowpack averaged across the state, and this green star is our long-term peak snowpack date. And you can see our black line, which is this year, because of last week's snowstorm, got very close to long-term median right around the peak date. We fell just a little bit short. Then, of course, we were followed by a week of very warm temperatures, and we took a precipitous dive in our snowpack numbers. So this means we have almost certainly hit peak snowpack for the year, and we are on the downward trend, which means we're just going to start losing snow as we deal with all the melt. And that's likely to continue in the next week with no big storms on the horizon. Because we're getting good nighttime freezes, this has led to generally safe avalanche conditions or low avalanche danger across the state here on Thursday. But that is going to change, and we're going to move back into moderate danger across large portions of Colorado's mountains because of the warm temperatures, which get warm enough to prevent actually a fairly good freeze at night. I want to show that by looking at temperatures here. Those green temperatures are in the mid 40s to mid 50s, and those yellow colors are in the 60s and even 70s. And you can see our mountains are not getting freezing temperatures, those blue and white colors, until we get into Sunday morning, when those freezes do finally return, which means very weak freezes on Thursday night and Friday night. And that's going to lead to an uptick in wet avalanche activity. This is what's going to drive the moderate avalanche danger, is an uptick in loose, wet avalanches. We may see a couple other wet slab avalanches, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is going to be the most in-your-face problem. And you can see by our avalanche distribution rows, this covers nearly all slopes at all aspects and elevation, with the exception of those high elevation north-facing slopes, which are likely to remain cool enough to keep most dangerous wet avalanche activity at bay, at least through this initial warm-up. And here's what these avalanches are going to look like. You can see they'll start by coming out of really steep rocky terrain. They'll be easy to push, at your feet, your snow machine, at the bottom of your skis, that kind of stuff. And although most of these avalanches don't move fast, once they get going, can entrain quite a bit of debris. And here's an example from just this week, and you can see it's moving quite slow, but if you get caught up in this kind of thing, it can certainly injure you, twist a knee, or even worse if you get washed into a tree or something like that. And so here you can see what some of these avalanches look like. Some of them are gouging, down towards the ground, running fairly considerable vertical distances. Here's one in the Elk Mountains, which once it got going, moved like a river and ran over 2,000 vertical feet. So although these avalanches are much easier to predict than our persistent slab avalanches, if you do get caught up in one, they could be just as dangerous. And here is a good example of a precursor avalanche, which indicates that wet avalanche activity like this is likely to become more widespread very, very quickly. So you will see small, loose, wet avalanches coming out of steep, rocky terrain as your initial indicator that conditions are rapidly deteriorating.
Any other concerns we should know about?
Yeah, there are. One is the cornices. And so we have some fairly big cornices built up, around almost all mountain ranges. It's really hard to predict when these cornices are going to break off, pull back from the ridge, and calf, big, large, dangerous chunks, sometimes, bigger than Volkswagen buses, down onto the slope. Those can act as triggers for other avalanches or be dangerous in and of themselves because of how large they are. And while they're really hard to predict when the cornices are going to fail, this would be a good time for them to go, because we're dealing with not only very warm temperatures, the warmest of the season, but by Saturday we could be potentially looking at record warm temperatures. And so it's good to keep cornice at, big, large cornices like this, give them a little bit bigger buffer, particularly if you're out in the late morning into early afternoon when we're seeing the most meltwater enter the snowpack. And then lastly, we still have very persistent weak layers in the snowpack. A lot of these have seen water because of our warm-ups, in late March, but some of them are still dry. And as we produce prodigious amounts of meltwater and start pushing that deeper and deeper into the snowpack, we do have weak layers down there. And when they see water for the first time, can often fail in the form of wet slab avalanche activity. So it's a good time to stay up on the forecast and see when wet slab avalanches enter our radar again, which could very well be by mid to end of the weekend. And lastly, I do want to point out, we talked about small loose wet avalanches coming out of steep rocky terrain as one of the clues that Mother Nature gives us that conditions are becoming dangerous. The other things are roller balls and pinwheels like in this image, or if you simply find unsupportable snow surfaces or slushy surface conditions more than about 6 inches deep, this means it's time to move to colder, shadier slopes or just exit avalanche terrain altogether and call it a day.
So maybe get out earlier rather than later.
That is the mantra. Start early, end early, and realize with these record warm temperatures, your window for safe travel might be very short in the early morning hours.
Okay, Brian, thank you so much for being with us every week from Colorado Avalanche Information Center.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Okay, and check it all out. Go to colorado.gov/avalanche.